In 1847, a young Jewish boy from a small village in Bavaria packed up what little he owned and said goodbye to everything he had ever known. He was 18 years old, he had no money, he barely spoke the language, and he was heading to a country he had never seen. Nobody in America knew his name, nobody was waiting for him, and nobody could have predicted that this broke immigrant teenager would go on to create one of the most recognizable clothing brands in the history of the world. This is the story of how Levi Strauss, a poor dry goods peddler with nothing but ambition and a sharp eye for opportunity, built the empire behind the blue jean. Levi Strauss was born on February 26, 1829, in the small Bavarian town of Buttenheim, Germany. He was the youngest child of Hirsch Strauss and his second wife, Rebecca Haas, and from the very beginning, life was not easy for the Strauss family. Hirsch worked as a dry goods peddler, traveling from village to village, carrying a pack on his back, filled with fabric, thread, and household items to sell to local families. It was exhausting and unpredictable work, but it was the only way Hirsch knew how to provide for his children. The family was Jewish, and like most Jewish families living in Bavaria, at the time they faced significant discrimination and were legally restricted from owning land, attending certain schools, and working in many professions. These limitations shaped the Strauss family's world in ways that were difficult to escape. When Loeb was just 16 years old, his father Hirsch passed away from tuberculosis. The loss hit the family hard, not only emotionally but financially. With their primary breadwinner gone, Rebecca was left to care for her children largely on her own. Two of Loeb's older sisters had already emigrated to the United States a few years earlier, along with their husbands, and had set up a dry goods business in New York City called J. Strauss Brother and Quart, with few opportunities left in Bavaria and the weight of poverty pressing down on the family. Rebecca made a decision. She would send Loeb and his older brother Samuel to America to join their sisters and build a better life. In 1847, at the age of 18, Loeb Strauss boarded a ship and crossed the Atlantic Ocean, leaving behind the only home he had ever known. When Loeb arrived in New York City, he was immediately overwhelmed. The city was enormous, chaotic, and alive in a way that nothing in Buttenheim had prepared him for. He moved in with his sisters and their husbands and began working at the family dry goods business almost immediately. It was here, in the cramped and busy world of fabric bolts, buttons, and wholesale orders, that Loeb began to learn the trade that would eventually make him famous. He spent his early years in America working long hours, learning English, and absorbing everything he could about the business of buying and selling goods. He also began going by a new name. The Americanized version of Loeb felt more fitting for his new country, and so from that point forward, he introduced himself simply as Levi Strauss. For the next several years, Levi worked diligently within the family operation, traveling through the American Northeast as a peddler, just as his father had done back in Bavaria. He carried trunks of dry goods from town to town, selling fabric, ribbons, thread, and other household items door to door. It was hard and often lonely work, but Levi was good at it. He had a natural instinct for understanding what people needed and an ability to build trust with customers quickly. He saved his earnings carefully and continued to develop his knowledge of commerce and trade. By the early 1850s, Levi had established himself as a capable and reliable merchant, but he was still far from wealthy, and he knew that if he truly wanted to build something of his own, he would need to find his moment. That moment was about to arrive from the most unexpected direction. In January 1848, gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill in Coloma, California, and the news spread across the United States like wildfire. Within months, hundreds of thousands of people from across the country and around the world were dropping everything and heading west in pursuit of fortune. The California gold rush had begun, and it was transforming the American economy in ways nobody had fully anticipated. While most people dreamed of striking it rich by pulling gold from the ground, a smaller and sharper group of businessmen recognized a different kind of opportunity entirely. The miners needed supplies, they needed tools, food, clothing, and equipment, and they needed all of it desperately. The men who sold those supplies stood to make just as much money as the men digging in the dirt, and with significantly less risk. Levi Strauss was one of those sharp businessmen. In 1853, at the age of 24, he made the decision to leave New York and sail around the tip of South America to San Francisco, California. He brought with him a large supply of dry goods, including canvas fabric, thread, and other wholesale items, which he planned to sell to the miners and merchants flooding into the city. He also incorporated his own business upon arriving in San Francisco, registering it under the name Levi Strauss and Company. It was a bold move for a young immigrant who had only been in the country for 6 years, but Levi was confident in his instincts, and San Francisco in 1853 was a city of opportunity for anyone willing to work hard enough to seize it. When he arrived, he set up a wholesale operation on Sacramento Street and began selling his dry goods to the retailers and merchants who were supplying the mining camps scattered across Northern California. His reputation for reliability and fair dealing grew quickly, and within a short period of time, Levi Strauss & Co. had become a well-respected name in the San Francisco business community. Levi was not yet wealthy, but he was building something real, something with roots, and he was paying very close attention to everything happening around him. By the 1860s, the gold rush had slowed, but California's population had exploded, and the demand for durable, practical clothing among working men remained as strong as ever. Miners, laborers, farmers, and factory workers all needed clothing that could withstand the brutal conditions of physical work. The pants available at the time were made from cotton or wool, and they wore out, quickly tore easily, and fell apart at the seams under the strain of hard labor. Workers complained constantly about this problem, but nobody had yet found a satisfactory solution. Enter Jacob Davis. Jacob Davis was a tailor living in Reno, Nevada, who had been buying fabric wholesale from Levi Strauss & Company for several years. In 1870, a local woman came into his shop with a request. She wanted a pair of pants made for her husband, a large man who worked as a laborer, and she needed them to be strong enough to actually last. Jacob had been thinking about this problem for some time, and as he worked on the pants, an idea came to him. What if he reinforced the stress points of the trousers, the corners of the pockets, the base of the button fly with small metal rivets? The same kind of rivets used in horse blankets and tents. He tried it, and the result was remarkable. The pants were dramatically stronger and held together under conditions that would have destroyed a normal pair of trousers within weeks. Word spread fast. Miners and laborers across Nevada began requesting Jacob's riveted pants, and within a short time, he had sold over 200 pairs. The demand was growing faster than he could handle alone, and Jacob knew he needed to protect his idea before someone else copied it. But filing a patent cost money he didn't have. So he wrote a letter to his fabric supplier, the man he had been doing business with for years, and proposed a partnership. That man was Levi Strauss. In his letter, Jacob explained the invention and suggested that the two of them file a patent together, splitting the costs and the rights equally. Levi read the letter, recognized the idea's potential immediately, and agreed without hesitation. On May 20, 1873, the United States Patent Office granted patent number 139,121 to Jacob W. Davis and Levi Strauss & Company for an improvement in fastening pocket openings using metal rivets. The blue jean had just been born. With the patent secured, Levi moved quickly. He set up manufacturing facilities in San Francisco and began producing the riveted waist overalls as they were called at the time, at scale. The pants were made from a sturdy indigo-dyed denim fabric and featured the now iconic copper rivets at the stress points. They were practical, durable, and affordable, and working men across California embraced them almost immediately. Levi brought Jacob Davis to San Francisco to oversee the production side of the business, and together they refined and improved the product continuously. The early versions of the jeans were sold exclusively through Levi Strauss and Company's network of wholesale retailers, and the company's reputation helped distribute them quickly across the western United States. Levi was meticulous about quality control and insisted that every pair meet a specific standard before it left the factory. He also introduced the now famous two-horse brand logo stitched onto the leather patch on the back of the pants, depicting two horses attempting to pull a pair of the riveted trousers apart and failing. It was a simple but powerful image that communicated everything a working man needed to know about the product. These pants would not fall apart. Throughout the 1870s and 1880s, the business expanded steadily. Levi Strauss and Company grew from a small San Francisco wholesale operation into one of the most successful clothing manufacturers on the West Coast. Levi himself became one of the most prominent businessmen in San Francisco, known not only for his commercial success, but for his character. He was generous with his employees, paying fair wages at a time when labor exploitation was common. He donated regularly to local orphanages, hospitals, and the University of California, where he funded 28 perpetual scholarships that still exist today. He never married and had no children of his own, but he was deeply devoted to his family and his community, and San Francisco loved him for it. By the time Levi Strauss reached his 70s, he had built one of the most respected commercial enterprises in California. The company employed hundreds of workers, operated large manufacturing facilities in San Francisco, and distributed its products across the entire western United States. Levi himself was worth millions and was regarded as a pillar of the San Francisco business community. He had come a long way from the teenage boy who crossed the Atlantic with nothing but a trunk of dry goods and a willingness to work. On September 26, 1902, Levi Strauss passed away in his sleep at the age of 73. The city of San Francisco mourned. Businesses closed out of respect on the day of his funeral, and tributes poured in from across California. He left behind an estate valued at approximately $6 million, which he distributed among his 4 nephews, various charities, and the employees of his company. The San Francisco Chronicle described him as one of the city's most enterprising and valued citizens. His nephews took over the management of Levi Strauss and Company and committed to continuing the business in the spirit their uncle had established. For a few years after his death, the company continued operating smoothly, and the riveted jeans remained as popular as ever among California's working class. But the city that Levi had called home for half a century was about to face a catastrophe that would test everything the company had built. At 5:12 in the morning on April 18, 1906, one of the most devastating natural disasters in American history tore through San Francisco. A massive earthquake, estimated at magnitude 7.9, ripped through the city, and the fires that followed burned for 3 days, destroying approximately 28,000 buildings and leaving over 200,000 people homeless. The death toll reached into the thousands. The Levi Strauss and Company headquarters and manufacturing facilities were completely destroyed. Everything was gone. The factory, the inventory, the offices, the records. In a matter of hours, the physical infrastructure of the company that Levi had spent 50 years building had been reduced to ash and rubble. For many businesses, the 1906 earthquake was the end. Dozens of San Francisco companies that had survived for decades simply could not recover from the destruction and shut down permanently. But the nephews, who now ran Levi Strauss, and Company made a decision that reflected exactly the kind of character their uncle had modeled throughout his life. They chose to rebuild, and they chose to do so in a way that went far beyond simply reconstructing the factory. In the immediate aftermath of the earthquake, the company reached out to its wholesale customers across California and extended them credit, allowing them to continue ordering goods without paying up front until they had recovered financially themselves. It was a remarkable act of goodwill, and it cemented the loyalty of retailers across the state who would continue to do business with Levi Strauss and Company for generations to come. Within a few years, the company had rebuilt its facilities and resumed full production. The riveted jeans continued to sell, and the brand's reputation, if anything, had been strengthened by the way the company had handled the disaster. Levi Strauss and Company had proven that it was not just a business, it was an institution. Through the early decades of the 20th century, Levi Strauss and Company continued to grow steadily, but it was the middle of the century that would transform the company's blue jeans from workwear into a global cultural phenomenon. During the 1930s and 1940s, Western movies became enormously popular across America, and the rugged cowboys depicted on screen were almost always wearing denim jeans. The image of the American West, of independence, toughness, and freedom, became inseparably linked to the blue jean, and Levi's was the name most associated with that image. Then came the 1950s and the explosion of youth culture. Hollywood icons like Marlon Brando in The Wild One and James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause wore blue jeans on screen, and teenagers across America followed immediately. Jeans had shifted from being the clothing of laborers to being the symbol of rebellion, youth, and cool. Schools banned them. Parents disapproved of them, which of course only made young people want them more. Levi Strauss and Company found itself at the center of one of the most powerful cultural movements of the 20th century without having done anything other than make the same durable riveted pants they had always made. By the 1960s, Levi's jeans had crossed the Atlantic and were becoming enormously popular in Europe. Young people in Britain, France, Germany, and beyond saw American jeans as a symbol of freedom and modernity. During the Cold War, American blue jeans were so desirable behind the Iron Curtain that they were traded on black markets for significant sums of money. A single pair of Levi's in the Soviet Union could fetch the equivalent of several weeks' wages. The simple pair of riveted work pants, invented by a Bavarian immigrant and a Nevada tailor, had become one of the most potent cultural symbols on the planet. In 1971, Levi Strauss and Company went public on the stock exchange, marking a new chapter in the company's history. The listing valued the company at hundreds of millions of dollars and gave the Strauss family and their partners access to the capital needed to continue expanding globally. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the company launched new product lines, expanded into international markets, and grew its workforce into the tens of thousands. By the 1980s, Levi's was operating in dozens of countries and generating billions of dollars in annual revenue. The company was not without its challenges during this period. Competition from other denim brands intensified significantly, and shifting fashion trends occasionally put pressure on sales. In 1985, the Strauss family made the decision to take the company private again, buying back all outstanding shares in a leveraged buyout valued at $1.7 billion, making it at the time one of the largest such transactions in American business history. The move gave the family more control over the company's direction and allowed them to make long-term decisions without the pressure of quarterly earnings reports. Today, Levi Strauss & Company remains one of the most recognized clothing brands in the world. The company operates in more than 110 countries, employs tens of thousands of people, and generates billions of dollars in annual revenue. The 501 jean, a direct descendant of the original riveted waist, overall patented in 1873, remains one of the best-selling garments in the history of fashion. And the name Levi Strauss, the boy who left Bavaria with nothing and arrived in America with everything still to prove, is known on every continent on Earth. Looking back at the story of Levi Strauss, what stands out is not genius in the traditional sense. He did not invent the loom. He did not discover denim. He did not even come up with the idea of the rivet. What Levi Strauss had was something arguably more valuable. He had the instinct to recognize a great idea when it came to him, the courage to act on it decisively, and the integrity to build something that lasted far beyond his own lifetime. He was a broke immigrant teenager who packed a trunk of dry goods and sailed toward an uncertain future. And from that trunk, he built a billion-dollar empire that the entire world still wears today. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to subscribe and like the video. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.